Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Having a Strong Why, with Donna Elliott and Cheryl Lee. We talk about how what's going on inside your mind impacts your output, the fear of regretting not doing something being greater than the fear of taking the leap, and how they're helping people to live their best lives.
Donna and Cheryl are two powerhouse businesswomen who've worked together for 10 years, having cut their teeth working in high-level corporate leadership roles with the likes of Vodafone, but they believe that their real experience has come in their combined life lessons that have seen them overcome depression, grief and life-changing illnesses, to name just a few of the challenges that have been thrown their way in recent years. Best friends and soul sisters, the duo believe that through sharing their life lessons with the world and being brave enough to be their authentic selves, alongside sharing their knowledge gained from their leadership roles, they will empower other successful career women to feel inspired enough to do the same as they grow their mission of supporting over 1 million women globally by 2021 who may have been faced with dark, difficult and challenging times, to help more that see that now is your time. Okay, so talk to us a wee bit about how you two met.
Feels like ages ago now. How old were we? 20, 30?
It's 15 years ago.
15 years.
Yes.
So we haven't aged today.
No. We were working in corporate together for 10 years. And Donna was leading the site where we worked, where there was 800 people. Mm-hmm. And I was a right-hand woman.
We didn't start that way though, did we? We were both operations leaders of people at the time. We had about 100 staff each. Mm-hmm. And I always remember the first time I saw Cheryl walk across the floor, I thought, bloody hell, she looks scary. Like literally, like she's just got this very commanding presence and walk. And I was like, oh, and I think you had your shaved head at the time, didn't you?
Short hair, yeah. Back in the day.
And that was how we originally met. So we both joined the company within about a month of each other, financial services insurance. I think because we were the new kids on the block, a lot of the people there had been there for a really long time and were just a little bit more, I guess, set in their ways, whereas we were like the new school leaders, swore and were a little bit cheeky and liked to... We just had a different relationship, I think, with our teams than probably what was standard. But that was why we're being brought into that organisation, just to move things along a little bit.
We didn't do things the old school way. We came in with the new ways, and that wasn't always.
Well, it
didn't always go down well.
It didn't. And financial services, then, I mean, it's obviously heavily regulated. And I remember them saying it was, you do your one-to-ones every month, standard, but the one-to-ones were 3 hours long, and it was basically like an audit. So you were auditing your managers, everyone, and I was like, oh yeah, I won't be doing that. So like, this is what we'll be doing. We'll be talking about development and coaching. And that was when I think we both realised from those early months of working together that coaching was really important to us. We like to get the best out of people. So we were never like the managers that would sit down and talk to people about their stats and their wrap time. And for us, it was like, how are you? How are you doing? What's affecting you outside of work, inside of work? You know, what are your gifts? What do you bring to the job? And that was always instinctively the conversations we would have with people.
Well, we just instinctively knew that what's going on inside and inside your mind impacted your output. So it's not about how many sales you got, it's about what's going on internally inside your mind to bring out the best in you to get the end result. And back then we were much less... I didn't have as much coaching expertise as I do now, so I didn't really understand why I was good at it. It's just as I've gone along the way and invested in my own personal development, I've now realised that's one of my superpowers. I just didn't know it at the time when we were in corporate. So, yeah.
I'd come from more of a coaching background. So I'd come from I worked in a weight loss organisation, which actually, it sounds bizarre, but learning to think on your toes and coach people when they're at their most vulnerable and they're feeling very raw and they're not happy with themselves that they think you can see. And a lot of the time people had been being abused because of their weight by family members and, were secretly eating and really just had a whole other world going on internally within their bodies about themselves and this whole story. And I loved learning about that. And the organisation I was with invested a lot of time and energy in us and teaching them how to coach and video them with coaching. And it was brutal at the time. We had 12 months of really rigorous training. But I just loved it. Like, I learned so much. I learned about the Ken Blanchard ways around situational leadership, and that was what I brought a lot of that to the organisation that we worked in at the time. Yeah, that was it really. We were friends from there. We were in that organisation for 10 years together.
But when we met, we just connected. We knew we were soul sisters, and now we've got a program where we have soul sisters. But at the time, and when we left the organisation, so we went in our different directions, we always said to each other, we will be working together in the future and we'll be making a difference in the world. We didn't know when, we didn't know how, but we just knew that this divine timing would be presented to us, and that's what would happen. And last June, it happened.
Ta-da! Yeah.
Was that by magic, or was there an event that you had to make the choice to say, right, done with corporate, let's roll?
There was
how did you get to that?
Well, there was a couple of different things. So for me personally, so I was made redundant last April, but I was in a role, I was developing talent and leadership and coaching programs for corporate organisation, which wasn't really stretching and challenging me anyway. So fortunately, I was made redundant in the April, which the timing was alongside my dad. So he had a terminal illness, a lung disease, and it started to go rapidly downhill. So I literally left the job, and then 10 days later he was took into hospital, and then 10 days later he passed away. So it was a blessing because I was able to spend every day with him and my mum and my family while he was in hospital and be there for that sad time. In the meantime, I'd set up my own business. So I was going to focus on talent coaching and leadership, but then I was having I knew that I wanted to be a coach. I've had this thing and is wanting to be coaching for a living for over 10 years. I've done my neuro-linguistic programming qualifications, NLP, but I had a fear holding us back of, all these different things that I'd put blockers I was putting in my way to say, I can't do it this, I can't do it then. I'd change it to I was going to do it when I was retired, because the age I'd set out was 45. And then last year when I was 45, this happened. So, and a big part for me was my dad passing away. It was like, what the hell am I waiting for? Like, I can go on for the next few years thinking about all these excuses about my fears to why now isn't the right time. Pardon the pun. But it felt like for me as well, and Donna will talk through her bit, it was now was my time combined with you arrived at your time.
I arrived.
At the same time. Time.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was bizarre because I had left corporate life. I'd been working, 20 years in leadership roles. And I'd led huge teams all over, here and on the India, Egypt, people all over. But I was always just on call constantly. So when I'd taken redundancy from Vodafone in January the year before, I lose track of the years, I had just made a conscious decision that I didn't really want to do that again. I'd always wanted to have my own business. So I set up consultant, and I've been doing some consultant work. And when Cheryl then came onto the market, I said, come and work from my HQ for a little bit, and we'd sort of said we would overlap and do some leadership development. So if Cheryl got some big contracts that I could help with, I would help her. And I was looking for a big contract, just expecting to go and travel, because I'd always travelled. So I was never at home. From my little boy being 9 months old, I worked away every single week, and he was 4 by this point. So it was just one of those... I wasn't in a contract. Cheryl then came on the market, and you feel like there's something pushing you. And I'd bought a coaching domain like nearly 20 years ago and just didn't know what to do with it. Thought, well, who would want to hear what I've got to say? What have I got to teach anyone? What skills have I got that could add any value? Obviously not really realising that that's what I did in corporate life as a leader of people. Hadn't kind of knitted the two together. And then at the beginning of last year, I'd had a conversation with an amazing woman who's a health coach who I was connected to by our old financial director. And she had... she'd said to me, she'd basically given up a job in the city. She'd worked in London, had a great career, given it all up, gone to live in the countryside, and was doing health coaching with people, was walking her dogs, was having wine at 3:00 on a Friday when I was normally in a train coming back from somewhere. And I said, oh God, like, that sounds amazing. And she said, well, what would your life look like if you did this? And I literally burst into tears. And that was in the January. And I rang Cheryl saying, I've had this epiphany, but I don't want to talk about it because it's too upsetting. Because this thing in my head of, I'd been home a few months by this point. I was like, do you really want to go away? Do you really want to pack that case again and go to Birmingham or Manchester or Stoke or Glasgow or somewhere else exotic? And then it was the 4th of April, I then had a conversation with a lady who I then hired as my coach, who had said to me, what if you just spend 15 minutes a day just looking at what it would be like in 5 years, you could have your own company doing coaching services. And I was like, well, I could do that. That's not too scary. I could do that. And then that was the 4th of April. And then this whole, Cheryl was then made redundant and Dave passed away. And it was, when Cheryl was away mourning and sitting, she only had a week in her PJs, mourning the loss of her dad and watching a lot of Game of Thrones she was doing at the time. That was
all 7
That
seasons.
was how she neutered herself, just neutralised herself watching Game of Thrones. Yep. And she came back and I'd seen this guy talking, and he was just he was online on YouTube, I think I'd seen him talking about how you've got all these life lessons. And if you're brave enough to talk about them, there's people out there who want to listen, because there's a million leadership coaches, there's a million business coaches, but there aren't many people who will actually go out there and talk about what's really impacted them in their life and what those events have been. And if you can then coach people through that or do whatever you want to do with it, blog about it, whatever, there's a whole career that you can make just by using your stories. And that blew my mind, because for me, I always thought I had to have some other skill over there somewhere that I had to get a degree for or something. It hadn't occurred to me that actually just your life could be the lesson in itself. So when Cheryl came back to the kitchen on the Monday, I said, will you just watch this 10-minute video of this guy? Like, it's blown my mind. And that was it. Literally, Now Is Your Time was born on that day, because I said, like, that's what we could do. That's what we could take into the world, be honest and vulnerable and open and talk about all these things that we've been through as women, adoption, divorce, infertility, abusive relationships, all these things that we've been through. What if we talked about that up front and centre, and the coaching came with that? We helped people through those times, people who are stuck, people who've been in corporate world and want to leave but don't know how to do it because they don't have the confidence in themselves. And that was how we started.
Because we went away, didn't we? And we had to look into our own stories. And when we got back together, I mean, it's funny because I was like, well, I haven't had any moments in my
Yeah, she's like, I haven't had any trauma. I'm sitting there thinking,
because I'm like the ultimate positive person. So I was like, nothing's actually happened. Anyway, when we came back together,
we give each other a day to go off and do our pit moments, as we call them. Like, look at your lifeline and see what those things are on there.
But there was common themes where we both had low self-worth, both didn't feel worthy, didn't feel deserved, didn't feel good enough. So that was part of our message when we were going out to talk to people, women, who would connect to us. Well, at the time we didn't know if they would.
Well, we didn't
this was just the idea. If we shared our story, will the women and men who have low self-worth, don't feel good enough, don't feel worthy, actually want to hear our story, and we'll attract the people who have the same feelings. And luckily it worked. A year and a half later it worked.
Well, we didn't know if they would want to talk about it, because we thought they might be happy to listen, but they might not necessarily want to join in that conversation. There's a lot of shame that you have around these feelings. There's a lot of shame around being in abusive relationships. There's a lot of fear around talking about the fact that you haven't got self-confidence but you're leading 1,000 people, because you don't want to, the thing you tell yourself is you don't want the people not to have faith in you, but really it's just because you're scared to admit it. So there was all of these like fears and bubbling up inward, but I think the fear of not doing it at that point was greater. The fear of regretting not doing it, of going in another 10 years or going into another corporate role where I was just traveling 4 and 5 days a week, and I loved my job, but it was a job, it wasn't my work. It didn't ever feel like my purpose. And all my life I've read things like The Secret and the Law of Attraction and understanding the universal laws, and just kept knowing this thing of whatever your bliss is, if you follow that. And my bliss was always just coaching people, helping people. So that fear became greater than the fear of not doing it, and that, I think that was our universal tipping point.
It's often the case, isn't it? How you describe it better than I do, don't you? Where the fear, or it's the pain of not doing
Yeah.
something is greater than actually doing something.
And you need to know
absolutely.
what the first steps are as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
So if you want something, you don't know how to do it, you'll not do it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you just know how to take the first little baby steps.
Yeah.
Well, we call that taking inspired action,
Yeah.
don't we? Like
Yeah.
one step at a time. And one of the first things we did was set up our Facebook group
Yep.
so we could create a community for like-minded people who wanted to come and share and be vulnerable and share their stories in a safe place and get support and motivation, inspiration, whatever it is they needed. It was the first part of us starting a movement.
Yeah, to pay it forward.
So yes.
And one of the things that really held me back at the time was, whilst I've been in my marriage now for, I think at the time it was like 11 years or something, I'm losing track, 10 years, because I'd had a really abusive marriage in my 20s that I had escaped from, I didn't want to be seen, so I wasn't on Facebook, I wasn't on Instagram, I was under the radar. And I remember talking to my coach and saying, like, I'm still scared of being out there, of being visible, I don't want to be found. And she and what she said to me was, well, that's great and it's understandable, but if you do that, it's just known that you are still being controlled, that your life is still being dictated, and you're going to allow all these people that actually need your help to be robbed of that opportunity because you're scared. And that was all I needed. I cried a lot and it was really difficult, but I remember saying to Cheryl, like, I'm ready now, whatever we need to do, I'm ready.
Yes, I've literally, since I met James, been saying the same thing to him about all of those people that just need his version of help.
Yeah. Because there are people there that need it. And that's what I then realised, it was me being selfish. And there are people behind it. The last time I'd been in that situation, I'd been on my own, I'd been very isolated, and now I had an army of people next to me. And I was a different person. But it's just remembering that it's hard at the time.
And like the last year and a half, like our husbands have been very understanding, because you can imagine we both come from very good job, very well paid jobs, and then we'll go home and just say to my husband, oh, by the way, we're setting up, Donna and I are going to business, we're setting our time up. Okay. It wasn't really planned. Wasn't something that we'd budgeted for. So
Did you sit down and do a business plan and a cash flow forecast?
Well, we had to give the bank.
Of course.
We worked out how we're going to pay the bills that month. Is that the same?
I think you just make a number up, don't you, and give it to the bank and the accountant. Well, I think we're going to earn this much money.
Well, I think at first we were like, well, we'll make 100 grand in the first few months, because obviously everybody, I mean, it was, we were just plucking numbers, we'd heard a podcast or something. We're like, oh, everybody's going to want this.
No.
Yeah. It takes some, because people don't know who you are, right? So that was unexpected. And then just how long it took to develop, because I have perfectionist tendencies, being a recovering imposter syndrome person. So everything, I wanted to know what the packages were. I wanted the website. I wanted it to all look like, and feel established, because to me that was important.
Which all of the entrepreneurs tell you not to do.
Yeah.
They actually say, don't do anything
Don't do
like
any of that.
As long as you've got clients, don't do any of that until you've got 50k. Okay. Well, we found that out after. We'd spent 6 months.
Around the kitchen table, learn how
building
to work
everything.
MailChimp and
Lead pages.
and
You
we
name
scrapped
it.
most of it after we did it the first time, because things had changed.
Yeah.
But it was character building. But I think it's weird, because all through that time, actually it just helped us to keep clarifying our why was so strong, that we just wanted to work with people who were ready for change, who were ready to live the best version of their life, and to step free and out of those limiting beliefs that were holding them back. And we knew that they didn't know how to do it, or even that they had those limiting beliefs. They just think, well, I'm on the hamster wheel and I'm going to keep going. So it just helped us to really solidify our message and get clear on how important it was to us. I think if it had come really easy straight away, we probably wouldn't have appreciated it as much as we do.
Well, we'll just tell
now.
ourselves
I like there to be a
that. Because
reason.
we didn't, so we'll just
There needs
tell
to be a
ourselves that.
reason.
But like now Donna's been to San Diego.
Yep.
I've been to LA. So we have gone out of the country, global, in the past few months. Just after, we turned one, didn't we, in June? So, but
were
within the
one.
first year and a half. And what we both found when I went to LA and Donna went to San Diego, we were around like a lot of other coaches who all have big ambitions like we do. We want to be world leaders in coaching transformation. And we were surrounding ourselves, and we came back with a lot of confidence, didn't we? Both of us, from our different experiences of actually our purpose and what we know that we are we are doing now what we were put on this earth to do in this life. This is what we're meant to be doing. It just was even stronger for us both when we came back from these experiences being in America, that actually we're really clear about where we're going and what we want to do, and with the confidence to carry on through into our second year.
It's exciting now.
And we've invested a lot of money like in ourselves. So what we realized quickly was there are people out there doing what we want to do. Let's just go and ask them. So we did some online stuff. We did like an accelerator course, but the coach that we're working with now, my initial coach really got us on the right path, and then we wanted to work with a coach who has got more of a business model moving forward, because for us it's really important. I think there's a huge educational piece still about coaching. I think people don't really, especially in the UK, grasp the concept of it. People will go out and get a business coach and they'll play through the nose for that, but a mindset coach they're a little bit more reluctant about, whereas where like you can have all the business plans in the world, if you don't believe you can achieve it, you are wasting your money. And a lot of our clients have actually moved away from their business coaches to use us and are achieving incredible business goals because they believe it now. So there's an educational piece for us around it, but there's also a piece around it being accessible to everybody. So again, we don't want coaching to be something that only elite people can have, only CEOs, only execs in businesses. Some of the companies that we're working with are really interested in making sure that the middle management layer has it, which is what we feel passionate about, because we know from working in those organisations like that, that's the layer that often gets neglected, and they're often the ones that need it most. And you've got a lot of women there who will never really lean into their potential because they're not being invested, and they're suffering from imposter syndrome and all the rest of it. So if you put some money around that layer, which is what some of the organisations who we're working with are really passionate about doing, so they're the ones that we're looking for. But equally, our products and services for us need to be all encompassing. So it doesn't matter what your budget is, whether it's free and you come and work with Win the Soul system, or whether you can afford a one-on-one coach. There's something for everybody at all levels. It shouldn't be an elitist thing.
No, I think that's really important.
It is. Like for us, because we could, there's easier ways to make money, right? We could just go out and say we're just going to get 2 clients a year and they're all going to pay us 6 figures and just work with those clients. But that was never...
It'd be a bit boring though, wouldn't it?
Well, it would. It would. It was never really, like, that doesn't make us feel excited. And we think we've stepped away, as Cheryl said, from well-paid careers. So every day when we jump out of bed, it has to be something that makes us feel excited.
But we got to our first year in June, and then we'd done some online programs, and then we wanted ready to take the next step for us to invest in ourselves. So we're on a success accelerator program where we have access to 4 different coaches, which has been amazing for us personally and also the business, just to get some direction what to do, because you can get overwhelmed as an entrepreneur. We've got all of this stuff. We've got a 3-year plan and we know what we want to achieve in the 3 years, but actually, like you just said before, it's taken one action. So what's the next best action? So that really helped us to get some definitive plans in place. We work on 90 days goals, so you know what we're going to do in the next 90 days. And then since then we've worked with one-on-one clients, but we've also launched our group programs. Then early next year we're going to be launching more products. But it helped us to we want to just do everything all at once, and then you just end up like a headless chicken. So our coaches helped us chunk it down into bite-sized chunks, and then we've achieved loads more in that 6 months because we broke it down and took one step at a time, rather than doing everything and not doing everything very well.
And like from a revenue perspective, when we slowed down and worked smarter, not harder, we made as much money in 1 month as we had in the full 12 months of operating, which, not that it's about the money, but actually as an entrepreneur, when at least you are feeling comfortable about your cash flow and your finances as a woman trying to do that side of it as well, we felt more comfortable that we can continue to serve powerfully and look at the other ways that we can make a difference when you're not worrying about... Because, you know, you should, going into business without a backup plan, and we wouldn't ever advise anybody to do it the way we did it, actually. Generally speaking, we'd say have some backup in the bank, but we literally just down tools, stopped looking at other jobs, stopped doing it, and said, like, we are just all in. And everybody said to us, you're absolutely insane. do it in 6 months, but I just couldn't. That worm was in my head now about making a difference and getting to these women who had been like we had been. There was no going back.
And how many of our family members? So how long are you going to give it?
Yeah.
Before you call it a day and get a real job.
Thank you so much for your
How
support.
long are you going to give it? But it's coming from a place of love, place of concern. My husband's having a meltdown that we're going to lose our house, like a year in. So how much longer are you going to give it? Like, just so you know, like this is for life.
Yeah.
Like this, just so you know, this is for life. Like this is just how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
But when you have a knowing inside that you're on the right path and it's all going to work out, but you can't explain to someone else how or why, it's quite difficult for them to comprehend. But we just knew that we're on the right path and doing the thing that we meant to be doing. But us feeling and knowing that is quite difficult to then explain to a family member who's really concerned. And it's looking after you. Well, you can't see how it's going to happen, but just, you know, the universe is going to work with us and make it happen. And they're like, what?
Yeah, we're like all for like literally meditating on it and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, not everybody gets that, right? So everybody else is like, that's nice. You know, they're looking at you with the, oh, she's lost it look.
I get that look a lot.
Yeah.
Well.
We have faith in the universe that it's all going to be fine. This is what we're meant to do. And people are like, okay. If it doesn't, if the universe is on holiday, what are you going to do? Kind of.
What's your backup plan?
But yeah, it's just been, we're very grateful. And we think that actually, had we not spent a lot of money on our development to get to where we are now, the landscape could actually be quite different. The husband might have been right, you know. But it was, for us, it wasn't a gamble. It was an investment in making sure that we did things properly, and being consistent with what we've done, we think is really important. We haven't chopped and changed. We haven't come up with a different direction.
No.
Fundamentally, the business is still exactly as it was when we sat around the table at the end of May last year.
It's amazing, really, because last May when we developed the Real You programme, and we've been using that as a blueprint for our one-on-one coaching clients. But this year, when we launched our first group programme in September, the programme, the steps, the content was still exactly the same as when we wrote it out last May, even though we hadn't worked with any clients. All of the language, the pain points, everything that the clients wanted was exactly as we did mapped it out in May before we'd even coached anybody. So coming back to that, when we actually launched the programme, and to see it was exactly the same, that just proves that the universe is right. How would we have known?
It does, and I think it came from us from a place of total authenticity, didn't it? Of like looking at our pain points in life and saying, right, so, because when you say to someone, it'll all be okay, or don't worry, you'll get through this, or there's a light at the end of the tunnel, it's like, right, well, how did we find the light? How did we switch it on? What were the steps? And we literally sat and broke down from the times we've been through and the things we've learned and the coaching that we know and the exercises and the techniques and the strategies that we know. What does that look like, and when do you do them with a person? And that was what we mapped out, and that was where the 5 steps came from. So we say this to people all the time. What we use with you isn't something we picked up from a book or something. It's what we have been using for 15 years. Like it's
a proven concept.
It's and it's, you know, we've probably read 5,000 things more than that, but they're the techniques that we know are the ones that actually reap dividends. And for me, a lot of the techniques that I personally used was coming out with divorce at 30 years old, nearly going bankrupt, not knowing what the next year was going to look like, having your whole life all of a sudden unsure when you've told everybody or given the impression to everybody that you've got this lovely life, and then everybody can see your dirty underwear. And then having to pick yourself up from that, you know, move your career forward. And for me, that was all internal work. I realised at that point that I literally had nothing else, like nothing left to lose. Even my dignity was gone from where I was sitting. So to come from that place of pure ground zero and build yourself and your life back up again. A lot of the lessons that I use now, teach now and work with and mentor and coach are from those periods of my life where it was literally all on the line. So when we say to someone when they're having a really hard time, we can look them in the eyes and say, generally speaking, we know what you're going through, because a lot of the time they've gravitated to us because of some of the stories that we've shared. I mean, you going from thinking, well, I haven't really had a bad life and I've not really had any pit moments. I was like, can I do this exercise with you? Can we start with like being a single parent or maybe rewind back to feeling bizarre as a young black girl, but not really realizing that you are black, being brought up by a white family after you're adopted. And, you know, there might be some things in there that people can relate to. And she was like, oh, I hadn't thought of it like that. I just got on with it.
But ultimately, what we want to have is a charity foundation. So in the next few years, we'll be wanting, like, it's really passionate to us on two elements. One is to work with teenage kids, because some of Donna just said there, in terms of, I think, and my own daughter as well, who she's 20, she's coming up 22 now, when children are grown up, some children, and they get to teenage years and they go to comprehensive school and they start to fit in, and they don't really know what their identity is, and they lose their self-esteem and their confidence, and then that can impact their lives in their teenage 20, 30, in my case, into my late 30s. We're really passionate about wanting to work with teenagers and having a foundation so that we can help teenagers, all the stuff that we're doing now with women in their 30s and 40s, actually let's do some of that with the teenagers before they lose their identity and their self-worth and their self-esteem, so that they can imagine how powerful they're going to go and be in life. So that's a real huge passion of ours. That's something that we will be doing in the future.
Well, we were actually talking about this. So my little boy is in year 5, so he's got one more year of bliss before he goes into the, I found my own personal experience, horror of year, whatever, 7.
Which is like senior school.
Yeah, senior school. The transition for me was horrific, to the extent that I managed in that whole year of being really bullied to persuade my parents finally to let me go to boarding school. So we were really lucky. My dad was in the army, so there was like loads of like money available for that. But I don't even know where I would have been if I'd have been had to stay in that school. It was horrific. So we were trying to think of how to, you know, how we can help my little boy go through that transition, because he's one of these that doesn't know when to pick his battles. He'll fight, but he's got this really strong sense of fairness.
Yeah, my daughter's exactly the same.
And it's like, dude, just walk away. You don't always have to be right. I don't know where he gets that from.
And Holly, because Holly was like that and would fight everyone else's battles, then when they didn't fight her battles, she couldn't quite understand, because she has this sense. But she would tell the teachers that she didn't think they were being fair, and explain to them the reasons as to why she didn't think they were behaving in the right way in front of all the rest of the class.
I've got one of them as well,
Didn't go down so well.
No. But she's doing really well now, your daughter.
Yes, she is now. Yeah, so she actually, she said, well, think it in your head and smile. But, you know, there's some places where you can't just tell the teachers how to manage their class when you're 11. It's not something to.
And Caleb is an up and coming one of them as well. Yeah, a very strong sense of right and wrong. But we weren't given those tools, were we, as kids? Like, and we don't. And I think we are now a whole generation coming through where we are giving our children a different toolkit, a different set of techniques to have these conversations. And I talk about it all the time, you know, that the hidden chimp book, like we use that with Caleb to help him explain his emotions, and there wasn't stuff of it. Like my mum would just say to me, "Oh, you're being a bit dramatic," you know.
You're such a drama queen.
Yeah,
get over it.
And she meant they meant well, and we know when you know better, you do better, as Maya Angelou says. Okay, so. For me, I'm really excited to see what will happen, and there are some schemes where they're going into school and working with children, and I just think they need more of it, and more practical stuff and hands-on stuff, and more coaching on that side of things, not just on maths and geography and you know, all
trigonometry.
Mindset. I mean, imagine having a whole module on mindset.
Or even finance. You know, how to manage your own finances when you're older.
It's crazy. And just on money mindset, like a lot of the women we work with, there are huge blocks around money, huge, especially coming from working class areas. They're the people that need it more, because they've often got huge amounts of potential, but the fear of money, and then, you know, upbringing around money's scarce. It doesn't grow on trees. You know, it's hard to come by. Be grateful for what you have. So I'm all for bringing Caleb up to be grateful, but equally, I told this story on, I think it was on LinkedIn in the summer, and he came and he said, "Mom, I've decided I'm going to buy a black and gold Lamborghini." I was like, all right. And my mate straight away was, "Would you know how expensive they are?" And they're a lot of money. And I said, "They're expensive cars." And he said, "Yes." I said, "You could buy a house for one of those cars." He said, "Yes, but I'll buy the house as well." And that's when I realised my tape in my head was about to become my child's tape. And I stopped myself and I said, That's really exciting. What colour did you say? He said black and gold. I said, fantastic. I can't wait to say that. So for him now, I was so proud of myself in that moment for realising that my tape about money was about to become his tape, and we just cut it off. So I'm like, go get
generational money blocks not passed on. Well done, you.
Yes, I was just so proud of myself. Although you just still walk around everywhere going, how much is this, Mum? How much is it? And I'm like, maybe that is still like a thing. But not in a way that it stops them from buying it. You know, it still goes in the basket. Yeah. But yeah, so there's so much. These tapes and these recordings about how we feel about ourselves. When we're talking to people, we often say, like, what's your story around that? Because you will be telling yourself a story, and the problem is sometimes it's like just rattling away in your subconscious, and you don't necessarily realise what it's stopping you from doing. We coach each other, constantly. It's embarrassing how much contemplating of the navel we do. It's almost every conversation. You laugh at James, are you the same? But it's like, it's a good thing. But we still discover stuff about ourselves every day, and this is our job. So
the journey never ends.
No.
And we have 4 coaches. Like, I keep thinking, how much more can there be? You know, we've got a money coach, a spiritual coach, a business coach, sales coach. But we're still constantly learning, and actually we're so lucky because all of them, it'll come down to, it's very rarely the technique of something on your Facebook, whatever. It's usually the mental blocker you've got around it, and the intention to which you're doing that work that's leading to being successful or not.
That's epic. Yeah.
It is. I often think of the mindset around money. It's a bit controversial, I think, but I need to write a blog on something like this. But there's a problem. I've lived in other countries, and I lived in New York for a while, so I've had about 3 years of experience to the more American culture. I think of a book. I think it's The Magic of Thinking Big. I think it's called. Dr. David Schwartz, British guy that lived in the States a long time, and someone asked, how would you describe the difference between a Brit and an American? Some people won't like the story, but it's 2 guys digging a ditch. British guy, an American guy, and a Rolls Royce drives past. The British guy says, I wonder who he's ripping off to be able to afford one of those. The American guy says, man, I'm going to own one of those one day.
Yeah.
And it's the mentality of, I don't care where you grew up, whether you had 1 parent, 2 parents, whether you were in foster care, you had no money, whatever you look like, whatever your religion is, if you decide, I'm going to own the next coolest clothing brand, I'm going to be the president, I am going to go to the moon, going to create the next coolest car, you can do that if you want. Whereas, sadly, I think this thing you said about mindset in children is if success isn't seen as, it's a bad thing. I find in the UK, if anyone's got money, they've ripped someone off, or they're on a trust fund, or whereas really what we should be saying is help those that need help in the state, but give people the skills and the belief to say, well, if I want to just move my income up a bit more to have a better quality of life, you can do that. It's fine. But I don't know, there's something, I don't know if you come across that. I find it's massively. You're almost taught that success is a bad thing and money's a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think for kids at school, success is on what your exam results are. Yeah. Like how many GCSEs you get, and you know what those levels are, and they have to be A+. It's not about how confident you are, how strong your mindset is, how authentic you are, how self-assured you feel. That really, so if you have an actual meltdown or suffer from anxiety, getting to the exam results, that the exam result is what's measured, not your internal mental state.
And it's bonkers we do it's such periods of transition in terms of being a human when we're supposed to be doing our GCSE and A levels. It's bonkers. Yeah. All of what rests on those, 4 years. Well, it's that. So there's 4 years where we're going through all sorts of changes, like physically, emotionally, and then I didn't get my GCSE in maths, so I'm going to have to do it 17 times until I get it. I did that right. Yeah, I know other people
But and I think what compounds that from a cultural perspective in the UK is we are quite negative about people who have money. I don't know if it's a going from working class thing. We've heard our family members saying things like, oh, you know, well, they're up their own bum because, you know, they've got money, or not
They're
people with money are
snobs.
evil, but they're snobs.
They're full of themselves.
You know, my husband didn't want Caleb to go to private school. He said, well, why would you want mixing with those kinds of people? I'm like, what kind of people is it you think go to private school? But it's there's just this real fear almost of money, and we see it with really successful. I mean, we coach really successful business people, females who've owned their own business, who've started them from scratch, and they are apologetic often when we say to them, so what in your financial goals with your business, where do you want to go there? We're quite neutral when we ask it. Like we don't care if they want to continue, whatever they want, it's our job to help them get there. And they're like, well, you know, I would like to, I mean, it would be great if we earn more. I mean, I'm not greedy. Well, we don't want you to be as greedy as you like, because the more money you have, actually, the more good you can do with it. If your sole intention when you get out of bed is to make money and screw everybody else, they're just not our clients. No. Our clients are the people who want to make a difference, who want to treat people really well, who want to employ people, and it would be fantastic if they could build a great lifestyle while they do that. We are all for those clients.
Well, we want to do that.
We want to have a nice life.
We're not apologising for the fact that we want to have money in the bank and create choices and options for ourselves.
But we want to do that by helping people live their best life, because again, there's easier ways to earn money. If it had been about the money, we'd have stuck around in the jobs that we had before. You know, and just took the paycheck every and not worried about it. So it's that balance, but there is such a lot of work to do, and money is to do with your feeling of self-worth. You can't separate them out. When you feel good about yourself and you feel confident about yourself, it's much easier to feel confident around money. But money is one of those subjects that's very, very charged with people. It's either very positive or very negative. Until you just kind of neutralize that, it's just a transactional thing. It doesn't mean you're a good person or a bad person if you have it or don't have it. So we have to kind of help them separate that sense of self away from the money and help them build just on the self.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, so we are coming to the end of this decade. And so it'd be really interesting to, well, when this goes out, it's literally days. Days
crazy.
left of this decade.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to find out what you would say to your 18-year-old selves if you could get in a time capsule and go back in time and have that conversation.
So diamond white rots your guts. And do not mix it with cherry pea. That's a bad combo. No good comes of it. If I could say to my 18-year-old self, so my 18-year-old self was just scared. Like I genuinely feel like I was a different person at that point. But actually, if I could tell my 18-year-old self just to tune into that intuition and trust it, and to go with the stuff that you know that you're good at, and not be scared about that and not be embarrassed about it, and just trust and have faith that it will all work out, and really be very careful and have those boundaries around how you allow yourself to be treated and how you treat yourself, because that's where the cracks for me started to appear. So yeah, treat yourself well. Have high standards of how other people treat you, and trust your gut would be for me.
Thank you.
And for mine, I'm trying to think for what I would say to myself, or what I said to my, because my daughter is 21 now, so when she was 18, and it comes back to that of being your authentic self. Like, as much as you can, live your life being true to who you are, and not what you think other people want you to be, and not trying to please other people, and that just having faith, similar to Donna, having faith that you're a good person, you're on the right path, you're on the path that you're meant to be, and it will all work out. You don't have to force things to happen. Like, what's meant to come to you will come to you at the right time and in your life. So, but it's really about being authentic and not being true to who you are, rather than trying to pretend and act out and wear all these masks and be who you want everyone else wants you to be, and then like you end up in your 30s and you don't know who you are. So just be authentic, be true to who you are, and be proud of who you are.
That's lovely.
I was just about to say lovely. It's very so English words. Lovely.
Lovely.
Americans
so
like
nice.
that word. Oh my God, I love it when you say lovely.
Lovely.
So that was lovely. And You're all over the place from what I see. I mean, not in a bad way, but
Thank you.
in a good way. I mean, you're, I was going to say then exposed, but that's
Oh my
another bad
God,
way.
we're exposed all over the place.
Shall we say your awareness in the marketplace? We see you in numerous places. That's what I'm trying to say. For those who've listened to this podcast, who've really enjoyed it as much as we have, and that's of interest to get in touch, is there a platform that you're most easy to find on or get in touch with you on?
Well, LinkedIn's probably where we have most of our activity, and you can find us either under the hashtag Now Is Your Time or under Donna Elliott or Cheryl Lee. But we like being on Instagram too, because we love the stories. So there you get to follow us and you can DM us on any of the platforms. We're all over. Now Is Your Time too is the hashtag that we're on all of the other platforms, including Twitter.
Because we've got our own Facebook page as well.
Now's your time, yeah.
Now's your time too.
But if you want the more behind the scenes, the more fun stuff, like seeing the antics in HQ and things, then definitely check out the stories.
Or
That's
Cheryl lying on the floor.
That's-
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that was LinkedIn.
That was on LinkedIn, yeah. But LinkedIn is where we try to do lots of regular activities and coaching, and just come and join the Soul System on Facebook. Like, that's where we're always in there asking you what you want help with, what mindset stuff you want help with, and the community on there are beautiful at helping each other through stuff. So
Fab.
Well, thank you
Thanks
ever
for
so
joining
much
us.
for taking
Thank
the trip
you.
through the Tyne Tunnel.
all the way through the tunnel.
All to north of the wall.
North at Wall. I got a nosebleed and everything, yeah. It's been fabulous being here, thank you. Coffee
Thank
and
you.
everything.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.